When people say they want to get rich, they are usually describing a feeling, not a plan. They want relief. They want room. They want to stop hearing the small humiliations of money in the background of every ordinary day. The card that almost declines, the bill that lands at the wrong time, the job they cannot leave yet, the quiet panic of calculating how many mistakes they are still allowed to make this month. I understand that feeling. I have spent my life thinking about money, but not because I worship it. I have thought about it because money changes the structure of a life. It changes whether your decisions are chosen or forced. It changes whether a setback is annoying or catastrophic. It changes whether you can wait, think, negotiate, and act with dignity, or whether everything in your future must be sold to the nearest acceptable bidder. That is why I never liked the shallow language people use around wealth. They talk about getting rich as though it were a dramatic event, a big month, a single idea, one deal, one stock, one lucky break. That is not how most durable wealth is built. Most durable wealth is built in layers. First, you stop the leakage, then you buy back time, then you increase usefulness, then you make usefulness visible, then you turn usefulness into a machine, then you use the machine to buy ownership. Only after that does the outside world begin calling you successful. By then, the success is usually old news to you, because the real work happened in silence when the visible results still looked unimpressive. That is the lesson I want to give you. If you are trying to change your financial life in a serious way, the first thing you must do is stop thinking like a consumer of hope and start thinking like a builder of systems. The public wants inspiration. I want mechanism. The public wants quick proof. I want durable leverage. The public wants to hear that one good year can change everything. I think one good year can absolutely change the direction of everything, but only if that year is used to lay foundations rather than decorate insecurity. That is a very different idea. A person can have a surprisingly good year and end it almost exactly where he started, because he converted the new surplus into lifestyle, applause, and scattered motion. Another person can have a merely decent year and quietly rearrange the whole future, because he used that year to build a machine. Machines matter more than moments. That is one of the most reliable truths I know. So if you came to me and said, I want to change my financial life as fast as possible, I would not begin by handing you a stock tip. I would not begin by talking about options. Real estate speculation, crypto, or all the shiny little doors desperate people keep trying to use to escape the arithmetic of their current life. I would begin with a question for the next 12 months. What is the thing you are actually building? That is the part most people skip. They do not choose a target clearly enough, and because the target is blurry, every day becomes negotiable. A man says he wants financial freedom. Fine, what does that mean in numbers? He says he wants to make more. How much more? He says he wants a side business. What kind? He says he wants options. What kind of options? Produced by what kind of recurring machine? The reason so many people stay broke is not always low ability. Often it is low specificity. A vague ambition produces vague behavior. That is why I like hard numbers. A person who wants to change his life needs a scoreboard clear enough that every day can be judged against it. Not 10 goals, not 25 dreams, one primary economic objective. For many people, the most useful first target is not $1 million. It is not retirement. It is not becoming an angel investor in a year and a half with no track record, no system, and no right to that. The most useful target is to build a reliable engine capable of producing $10,000 in a month. Not because 10,000 is magical, because it is enough to force a different level of seriousness. At that number, the person can no longer hide inside hobby thinking. He has to build something real. Now let me say something uncomfortable. If you really mean to do this, almost everything else must temporarily fall behind it. This is where the public becomes emotional. They want wealth without hierarchy. They want transformation without exclusion. They want to add building on top of a life already crowded with indulgence, distraction, mood, entertainment, random social obligation, half-serious hobbies, and endless digital noise. That is not how change works. If you are trying to get somewhere meaningful in a year, you need a wartime calendar. That does not mean misery. It means clarity. If something does not make money, build a skill or protect your ability to continue. It is likely a distraction. That is the level of honesty required. And yes, this will make you feel embarrassed sometimes. People always underestimate the importance of embarrassment tolerance. They imagine the barrier to wealth is intelligence. Often the barrier is the willingness to look temporarily foolish while you are still becoming the person who can carry the result. You will feel ignored, you will feel small, you will feel like you are doing work beneath the identity you wish you already had. Good. That is the price of escape. Most people are not poor because they lack information. They are poor because they cannot tolerate the awkward phase where they look less impressive than they will later seem in hindsight. If you can survive that phase, you gain an advantage that has nothing to do with IQ. I have always admired people who could do repetitive, ordinary, unglamorous work for a long time without needing immediate social proof. That quality compounds better than talent in many environments. And once you accept that the next year must be more focused than the previous one, the next task becomes obvious. You need inputs, not motivation, inputs. You need a mind loaded with principles that can survive the days when your emotions offer no help. That is why I have always read so much. Reading is one of the cheapest ways to borrow another person's lifetime of error reduction. You do not need 500 books. You need a handful that clarify the right things at the right time. You need to understand leverage, offer creation, habit design distribution, and the building of systems rather than jobs. Most people try to build financial lives out of opinion fragments gathered from strangers and headlines. That is like trying to build a house from a pile of random screws, 2 windows, and somebody else's roof. You need coherent frameworks. One of the smartest things a person can do early is keep a notebook of principles. Not a notebook of fantasies, a notebook of mechanisms. How do good offers work? How do businesses become systems instead of exhausting self-employment traps? What is the actual volume of effort required to become visible in a crowded market? What habits keep the machine moving even when feelings leave the room? What does good sales language sound like? What does trust look like in words? If you write these things down, you are not just collecting quotes. You are building internal operating code that matters. Now, after clarity and education, most people jump to passion. I do not. I want tools. I want inventory. What do you have right now that can already be turned toward money? A laptop, a camera, a phone, editing ability, writing ability, design sense, the ability to talk to strangers without freezing, the ability to notice what makes a product, a page, a message, or a system weak and improve it. Most people are sitting on underused tools and undeclared skills because they are busy waiting to feel fully formed before. That is a mistake. You do not need to begin with destiny. You need to begin with utility. This is one reason I care so much about commercially relevant skills. People get romantic about passion and then act confused when the market does not reward their inner life. Markets pay for problems solved. If you want money soon, you need a skill tied closely enough to money that somebody will pay for it weekly or monthly, not someday after the stars align. Sales, copy, lead generation, media editing, design with business purpose, automation, appointment setting, offer construction, customer acquisition, fulfillment systems. There are many possibilities, but the rule is simple. Choose a skill that either directly brings in revenue, directly protects revenue, or very clearly increases conversion, retention, or throughput. A skill that helps money move is a much better skill than one that merely sounds interesting. And once chosen, the skill must be practiced, not admired, not watched on video after video, while you pretend that passive exposure is learning, practice, replication, direct reps. This is where serious people separate themselves from spectators. The market does not pay you for understanding how a thing should be done in theory. It pays you for doing it well enough, reliably enough, and often enough that others can trust you with an outcome. Now comes another painful but necessary truth. Do not tell everyone what you are doing. I do not say that because mystery is glamorous. I say it because early plans are fragile, and the people around you usually know your past more clearly than your potential. Your inner circle often loves you sincerely and still gives terrible advice. Why? Because they are calibrated to the version of you they have already accepted. They are not imagining the life you could build. They are defending the emotional geometry that already exists. If you start trying to build something new, especially if it looks humble, awkward, or uncertain, at first, a surprising number of people will call their discomfort concern and offer it to you as wisdom. Ignore it. Do not take serious financial advice from people whose lives you would not trade for. That rule alone removes a great deal of noise. At the beginning, you are less a tree than a seed. Seeds do not need public debate. They need soil, water, quiet, and repetition. And if you are serious, you must also change your exposure. One of the strangest things I see in broke people is that they continue spending nearly all their time in environments that reproduce broke thinking. Same room, same complaints, same jokes, same assumptions, same suspicion toward people who earn more, same comfort with drift. Then they wonder why they do not grow. The human being is extremely adaptive. That is one of our great advantages and one of our great liabilities. You become like the rooms you remain in. If everyone around you treats money like a mystery, a scam, or a lucky event, then part of you will continue doing the same, even while you tell yourself you want more. That is why proximity matters. Get closer to competence. Go where people are doing what you want to learn. Events, workshops, communities. Not because networking is fashionable, but because seeing a thing repeatedly makes it psychologically real. The market may reward skill, but the mind often needs exposure before it believes the skill can be monetized by someone like you. That belief shift matters more than most people admit. And if you cannot afford to buy access expensively, then get it cheaply. Free events, public talks, online communities where actual operators speak. One useful mentor, one serious peer group. You do not need a giant network, you need higher grade inputs. Now, after all of this preparation, we reach the stage where the public usually makes its first fatal mistake. They try to sell to people who have no money. This is not compassion. It is bad strategy. If you are trying to change your financial life quickly, do not build around customers who agree you are valuable, but cannot pay enough for value to matter. Sell to people already buying. That is one of the strongest rules in business. Do not waste your first year trying to convince the wrong market to behave like the right one. Find those who already have a budget, already feel urgency, already understand the cost of their problem, and already spend to solve it. A dentist trying to attract more patients, a law firm that needs lead generation, a real estate team that needs content or conversion, a creator with income who needs operational support, a home service business that needs bookings, a clinic that needs better communication. Whoever it is, the criteria are simple. They have money, they have urgency. The result is measurable. You can reach them repeatedly. The process can be repeated. That is the market. Now take one type of customer and one clear offer. Not 10, not an agency menu masquerading as ambition. 1. The human mind loves variety because variety gives it excuses. One customer type forces learning. One offer forces refinement. I help this kind of person get this measurable result in this time frame without this kind of headache. That is enough. You do not need a theatrical website and 20 pages of branding language to begin. You need clarity and a way to get paid. Then you need proof. People do not owe you trust. They do not care about your effort. They care whether you can improve their life or business in a way they can feel. So race to proof. Get the first paying stranger. Not your cousin. The amount barely matters at first. The conversion matters. Because once someone who does not love you already is willing to part with money, the game changes. You are no longer guessing whether the market sees value in what you do. The market has spoken. One person paid. That is not yet a business, but it is a major psychological event. This is the first moment when fantasy gives way to data. And if earning that first proof costs you money in the form of time, mistakes, or minor expenses, so be it. I have no problem paying tuition if the lesson is real. The only thing I despise is paying the same tuition repeatedly because the student keeps refusing to write anything down. So document everything. What did you promise? What did you do? What happened? What result changed? What wording helped? What step created confusion? What part took too long? Every paying customer becomes a source of evidence and a source of operating instruction. This is how services become systems. Then put that proof where others can see it. A testimonial of before and after. That is what reduces fear in the next buyer. Now we arrive at the stage most people underestimate more than anything else. Distribution, getting rich fast, to the extent that phrase can be used honestly at all, is usually a distribution story once the offer works. The skill matters, the delivery matters, the product matters. But once the thing actually sells, the limiting factor becomes how consistently the right people see it. This is where lazy people disappear, because distribution is not a mystical gift. It is repetition, one channel, 1 year, daily activity, same market, same message refined by evidence, not endlessly reinvented because boredom is shouting. The internet has made one thing abundantly clear. Most people do not need a better product first. They need a better way of getting in front of the right buyers. That may be email, it may be cold outreach, it may be one content platform, it may be referral loops, it may be ads once the economics are known, but it should be one serious distribution path long enough to become dangerous. Dangerous in the best sense, because once demand starts arriving reliably, the business is no longer being dragged forward by hope. It is being fed. This creates a new problem, and it is the first good problem you get. Too much work for one person to handle cleanly. That is when hiring enters. And here, too, people love to become theatrical. They want a co-founder, an operations executive, a sales team, a fancy org chart. Most of that is ego. Your first hire is usually not a strategist. It is relief. Specifically, you hire to remove the repetitive, boring, time-consuming work that steals selling time from you. This is the essence of leverage. $1 paid to a contractor or assistant that gives you back selling hours and problem. Solving hours is not an expense in the ordinary sense. It is time purchased for high-value activity. You should remain responsible for the parts that create the money offer sales. Client trust, critical judgment, standards. But you should begin stripping yourself out of the repetitive mechanics as soon as the math supports it. Not because delegation is fashionable, because eventually the owner's job is not to do everything. It is to protect the engine and point it toward growth. Now, if you are wise, you then productize That is the next major leap. A service with endless custom variation is difficult to scale. A service with clear packages, clear outcomes, and clear price points becomes much more useful economically. The customer should know what he is buying, what it costs, what happens next, what the premium version is, what the standard version is, what the quick high certainty version is. This reduces friction, and friction is a tax. The cleaner your packaging, the more professional the whole operation feels. The more professional it feels, the less you compete like an amateur on endless negotiation. A structured business feels safer to buy from. Safety is worth money. Then comes one of the hardest disciplines in the world. Do not take too much out. This is where many potentially rich people accidentally become ordinary again. The business starts making money. For the first time, the numbers feel substantial. There is pride, relief, a little revenge fantasy against years of uncertainty, and an almost magnetic temptation to reward yourself. Dangerous revenue is not yours just because it passed through your account. At this stage, cash is oxygen. The money left inside the machine is what creates speed, quality, capacity, and stability. The money extracted too early often becomes furniture, ego, softness, and a whole new set of obligations the business must now support before it is ready. That is how small winners stay small. In the early serious growth phase, every dollar has a job, gear that increases quality, people who increase capacity training that reduces error and speeds learning, legal cleanup, better systems, faster response, cleaner delivery, reliability compounds. People pay more for reliable than they do for clever. That is another truth the public likes to ignore. At this stage, you stop selling hustle and start selling trust. And then, if you are paying it, you begin seeing where the real money actually lives in your industry. This is another revelation. The whales are almost never doing the same thing at the same level as the beginners. They are not just working harder. They are using leverage, ownership, distribution, cash flow structures, performance upside. They understand where value is created and who owns it. This is the question poor people almost never ask. The richer question is, where is the value being created and who captures it? That is ownership thinking. Maybe you add a recurring plan. Now people pay every month. Maybe you add a premium tier. Now you extract more value from your best fit clients. Maybe you add performance pricing. Now if your work creates upside, you share in the upside. Maybe you add referral systems. Now your customers feed your customer acquisition instead of forcing you to begin from zero every week. This is the part that looks sophisticated from the outside. It is not really sophistication. It is pattern recognition. You are no longer just doing work. You are redesigning the economics around the work. That is how businesses become assets, instead of jobs wearing a business costume. And finally comes the last stage, volume with discipline. Once you know what works, stop acting like a beginner who needs endless novelty. Find the 20% of actions that create 80% of the outcomes and pour gasoline there. That is what mature operators do. Not emotional pivots, not chasing every idea because stagnation feels embarrassing. They identify the bottleneck. If the bottleneck is demand, they feed distribution. If the bottleneck is capacity, they feed systems and people. If the bottleneck is conversion, they refine the offer. If the bottleneck is quality control, they standardize. The beauty of this stage is that your growth becomes more mathematical and less emotional. You are no longer a slave to mood, you are responding to constraints. That is how real businesses scale. Now let me say something that the internet does not like to say, because it sells fewer fantasies. You may get your first meaningful results in a year. That is possible. You may get to a truly different monthly income level in a year if you are focused enough, useful enough, and willing enough to suffer the social discomfort of the awkward phase. That is possible too. But it does not mean you have built something solid. Usually it takes around 3 years before a serious person begins to feel that the engine is real. Usually something like 7 years before the outside world starts calling it an overnight success. Usually more than 10 years before the thing becomes truly sturdy. That is the honest timeline. The good news is that time passes either way. That is one of the great hidden advantages in life. The years are going to move whether you build or drift. Most people drift because drifting looks easier in the short term. Then one day they wake up older, still needing the same month to go well, still negotiating with bills from a weak position, still hoping the next year will somehow carry magic the prior 10 did not. That is not bad luck. That is sequence failure. You build wealth by buying the right things in the right order. You simplify the calendar, you learn, you inventory your tools, you choose a useful skill, you protect the early phase from bad voices, you get closer to competence, you sell to people already buying, you race to proof, you create visible evidence, you choose one distribution channel and become relentless there. You hire out repetitive labor, you package what works, you reinvest with the discipline of a builder, not the appetite of a spender. You study the real players in your industry and copy the parts that are structural rather than theatrical. Then you scale by feeding the real bottleneck. That is how people actually change their financial life. Not by inspiration, not by one lucky trade, not by waiting until they feel ready, by building a machine strong enough that next year does not need to be begged for. And if you do that long enough, the real miracle eventually appears. You are no longer a servant of your current income. You become a steward of a system that can earn your raw labor. That is when the game changes. That is when you stop merely working and start owning. And that is when the future begins to feel much more negotiable in your favor.